Hi, and welcome to another episode of Epilogue. Jamie left a little too early, and he forgot to do the intro, so I'm doing it. But today, Jamie's talking with Dr. Mark Mayfield about the image of God, Imago Dei. So, yeah, enjoy the episode.
All right, Mark. Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Glad you're here. Hey, what are you drinking?
Well, you got me a nice black coffee.
Yeah, I knew that already.
I
but
don't.
yeah,
I don't. I don't. You can hate me later, but I don't make it bad. With
You're
other
not
stuff.
sugary. Yeah. See, I got a sugary, dirty chai. So yeah,
No, this sounds gross.
it's not gross. It's not gross at all. What do you think of the oleato foam at Starbucks?
I see that I wouldn't know anything about it because all I do is black coffee.
It's an olive oil foam that they put in your coffee. Have you heard of this?
No.
You got to
Don't
try
listen
it.
to him, it's
Don't-
poison.
It's
actually poison.
Jason knows that I go off on this. Like, it's really good, but it's the weirdest thing ever.
I bet it sounds weird.
They launched it, ironically, in Milan for Italians.
But here's the thing. Do you know how Italians think about Starbucks?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a lot of irony there.
Yes. Okay.
There's already this view of Starbucks. Then they decided, hey, we're gonna do something traditional Italian and put olive oil foam in coffee, and they're like, whoa,
No.
that's yeah.
So it's funny. I just got back from Denver teaching my Colorado Christian University students and that kind of stuff. And I've got a dear friend of mine, Dr. Javier Sierra. He's from Honduras, but he's Italian.
Yeah.
And so he's got the Latino, but then also Italian heritage. And we're making shirts next week, next residency that friends don't let friends drink bad coffee.
Yes. I like that shirt, man. But you would say that I'm drinking a bad coffee. It's not a coffee.
I would say that I'm drinking bad coffee, but it's coffee and it's caffeine, and I'm okay with it right now.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. Normally it's like I prefer to have it at home, but this morning I was
when you texted, hey, what do you want? I'm like, yes, caffeine. I'll be good.
Good. That's awesome.
But the olive oil foam.
Olive oil foam.
I'm just gonna have
you
to.
just got to try it. Just try it just to say you did, right? I mean,
Jason,
You don't have to try it. It's literally going to mess up your digestive tract.
Okay.
Do not try.
I will follow you there, Jason.
Yeah.
Well, in other news, you just recently started cutting your own hair, right?
I did.
It's looking good, man.
My wife. Yes, my wife is the one that does it for me too. So
well, it's looking good. I mean, it's impressive, man.
I gotta be like you.
I've saved thousands of dollars.
Yes,
maybe tens of thousands of dollars over the years, but yeah.
Well,
anyway,
I was looking at pictures. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm getting so gray. But then
you look at me and you're like, hey, I'm all right.
I got some room to grow.
You do, man. It's all good. So. All right, man. Well, fresh back from Colorado. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Braving the heat here and getting outside of your house and coming to the church.
It's okay. I don't mind it this year. It's not like we're dying by 100 degrees like we were last year.
It's true. And we will be.
Eventually. But not like last year.
Well, we're talking about Psalm 8, talking about this idea of finding our identity and who God is and his plan for history and being made in his image. And didn't fully have time to go into the image of God. Imago Dei is that the fancy Latin term for it. But I thought it'd be fun just to have a conversation about the image of God. I was thinking, man, who could I sit down that could wax eloquently about the image of God, and immediately thought of you. And so thanks for being here. And just thought we could dive into this conversation of the image of God and what is it. Obviously, that comes from Psalm 8 that says, what is man that you take thought of him, son of man that you care for him, yet you've made him a little lower than God, or Elohim, the angels, God, divine beings, however you want to translate that. And you crown him with glory and majesty and make him to rule over the works of your hands. And obviously, David's got Genesis 1 on his brain when he writes that. Genesis 1:26, and this is where we get the language of image of God. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. male and female, he created them.
I love that.
Yeah. Man, there's a lot packed in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's rich, and it's gosh, you see inherent value in humanity in that, and you see all these things. I mean, it's a beautiful passage. But let's talk first. What are some of the ways you've seen people define image of God? Like, when people say, like, what does that mean? How have you seen people define that?
Oh gosh. More in the kind of the cognition, the thought that we have, the reason that we have a mind, is because of it's reflective of the image of God, or the fact that we have intellect or reason.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like the fact that we have a rational brain that we can reason, and so people go, what sets us apart from the rest of creation? What sets us apart from the animals? Well, they can't do logic problems.
Right. They can't do math.
Yeah.
Quadratic equations is what I was trying to do with my daughter last night.
Nice.
I don't even remember what that is. But,
oh, dude. Yeah. I learn a ton through my kids.
Yep.
Because I've forgotten it all. But
homeschooling is.
Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly. But yeah, it's I think especially like during the Enlightenment, we define I think therefore I am. You know, that mankind, what defines us is our rational thought. And so people said, well, image of God, man, that's what it is. God's rational, and he created us in his image and sets us apart from the animals. And do you think it's more than that?
Well, I do. Go back to Genesis again. Like, how did God create the rest of creation? He spoke it into being.
Yeah, he spoke it in. Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But do we ever really slow down and look at how he created man? He formed him out of the dust of the earth. Yeah. And then what did he do?
He put his breath,
Yes.
his own breath in man.
Yes.
Yeah.
He didn't speak it.
Yeah, that's right.
He breathed it into existence. I mean, breathed man into existence. I mean, so think about the intentionality there.
Yeah.
I think I don't know why. I think we just kind of tend to just gloss over that.
Yeah.
And go, no, like there's a difference between speaking and breathing.
Yeah.
And so the breath in is imparting. It's like this impartation of a part of who the Trinity is.
Yeah.
Into us. And so the reflective piece is, mind, body, spirit. We see that represented in, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength, mind, body, spirit. And Paul talks about the renewing of the mind. Well, that if you look at the Greek in that, it's not just intellect, but it's emotion. It's the wholeness of the totality.
Yeah. You can't just narrow it down to the thinking part of
No.
this, right? I mean, this is, I love what you're saying about this breath of God. I mean, even Psalm 8 that we've been in, it talks about, David goes out and he's looking up at the stars, probably seeing, there's no smog back then,
or light pollution.
He's out in the shepherd's field and looks up and he sees these stars and he feels really small because what's man that you take thought of him? And, I'm looking up at the heavens, the works of your fingers. Like you made all this with your fingertips. And when you formed man, you didn't just make us with your fingertips. You breathed yourself into man and made him a living being.
Right.
That is. And so, yeah, we're not just this like thing he created, like a lump of clay that he molded. He's infused part of himself in us, and that's profound.
It is profound. And I think it's so profound that we shouldn't forget it, but we do.
Yeah.
Like and that's where I wrestle with sometimes in the field that I'm in and that kind of stuff going, it's my job as a counselor, especially a counselor who's Christian, to remind people of who they are and who they reflect.
Yeah.
We look at this world right now. What would you say? I mean, do you think our world has an identity? Do you think
100%,
the generations that are growing up right now, they're trying to connect? And in the Hebrew and Greek, the actual word for identity actually has a bonding agent to it. Like, so when we talk about our identity in Christ, it takes a whole new meaning of this idea that we're bonding to him in a way that is different than the world. But we see the world right now. This is where I think the Imago Dei conversation is so important, and we need to take this to our friends and how we treat people and that kind of. is because they're floundering.
Yeah.
They're not bonding to Christ or the community of Christ in the way that they should, imago Dei to imago Dei. And now they're going, well, what's the flavor of the month? What's
Yeah. Yeah.
what do I want to be today versus whose do I want to be?
Yeah. Well, and it's important when we even just look in the mirror and like, what am I finding my identity in today? Is it in this conversation I'm going to have and how well that goes? Is it in my job title? Is it in, so it's when we look in the mirror, and then it's when we sit across the table from another person, or man, when I drive through and get the Starbucks
and talk to your barista.
Do I see the image of God in the barista? Do I look at her and say, God made her in his image? I mean, and she's got a little bit of himself in her. And even if she doesn't know Jesus and that image is tarnished, she's still made in the image of God. So,
and I think our deep philosopher, Mr. Rogers, got this right, because he talked about finding the preciousness in others.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Mr. Rogers was a Christian, he's a Presbyterian pastor, but the simplicity of going, how do I find the preciousness of the other person? Even if I don't like them, even if I'm in conflict with them.
Yeah. Actually, you were talking before we even entered this conversation this morning just about kind of how you coach up the counselors you oversee and work with. And John, why don't you share some of that? Because I think that was an amazing.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think I brought this up maybe on another talk that we had, but this idea that we have kind of this gravitational field of sin, brokenness, and spiritual warfare, that we all, our own choices, sin, brokenness, kind of the result of the fall, and then spiritual warfare, these battles that we're fighting. And so the people that I work with and that I train my students up in that they work with can be anywhere from people that are struggling with addiction to offenders, right? That have been they've been perpetrating on others, and and I said, so with my counselors, I like, what does it look like to recognize and understand the imago Dei in the other person, whether they realize it or not, and treat them with that kind of honor and respect. It doesn't matter what they've done or their story. I mean, it does. But when we're trying to work through kind of this counseling relationship, drawing out that humanity and that sacredness of the imago Dei, it's amazing what it does in session.
Wow.
I've got stories upon stories. I've been doing this, teaching for 13 years, been in the counseling field for over 15. And I've got story after story of my students going, I had this client that was just outcast by the rest of the world because he was in a gang, or he was offended on somebody, or this, that, and the other thing. And I just sat and gave him honor and respect because of the imago Dei. And he broke down and cried, or she, nobody's ever experienced, told that to me or spent, and
Isn't that amazing?
It is. Well, but it is, and I hate to say this, it's simple, but it's hard.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, it makes total sense. Yeah.
And so as the body of Christ, how are we doing that with our kids, our in-laws?
Seeing the image of God in them.
And then not pushing past, not saying, do away with your boundaries. I'm not saying, that we have to be all in and allow ourselves to get hurt. I'm just saying it's a frame of reference and a mindset that in that interaction with that person, are they going to walk away feeling valued and loved based on how I've engaged them in that?
Yeah. Because and then the very least common denominator, even if we don't have anything in common, even if they're our worst enemy, they're made in the image of God.
I see the beauty within you, which is God, and the fingerprint, the imprint of God on you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's that changes a lot. Yeah, actually, as you're talking about that, I mean, on a less personal level, right? One of my favorite courses in seminary was actually it was related to the Imago Dei, but we were talking about culture and art and things people create, so music, film, artwork, and just talking about how do we see the image of God in this. And I think, gosh, the way that we interact with people, think about the game changer that would make, and think about the way it changes things when we interact, even like with art or music or film, and we go, wow, I see the image of God in the thing they created, right? Like
whether they do or not.
Yes. Yeah, because that's actually an aspect of the image of God is doing something with the world that God created. So continuing to create and exercise creativity on a creative God's world, right?
What, do you want? I mean, I don't.
Let's go down that rabbit hole.
Here's another thought to that, though, is how confirming and affirming of the truth of who God is through the expression of the Imago Dei in people that don't recognize that he's existed.
Oh, yeah.
Because why would we chase beauty?
Yeah.
Why would we create a beautiful song or a film or an art piece if there wasn't something outside of us that we're longing for and a truth that we're moving for? An atheist can say, well, there's no God. But okay, do you take a look at the beauty around you and go,
where does
wow,
that come from?
Or just wow.
Yeah.
Do you spend some time sitting and watching a film and just be moved by it? Yeah. If there was no God, you wouldn't have any of that drive, right? Yeah. So it's just like just from a purely logical standpoint, seeing the beauty of the Imago Dei around us is confirmation of the existence of God, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think what's even more mind-blowing, if you want to go, like, going down that rabbit hole, is why do, like, so many of these movies and stories have redemptive themes? And they're not, these aren't Christians or any, I mean, but that's because redemption is God's story, and he's made humanity in his image. And even if it's tarnished and broken, that story is going to come through in some way or another, because
we're pulled by that longing.
We are pulled by that longing, and we want that. We want redemption at the core, and so we tell stories of redemption over and over again.
When I tell people all the time, it doesn't mean you're going to, if you acquiesce to that statement and you're fighting the existence of God, but it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect.
Yeah,
doesn't mean it's going to be all better. But there's that tension. And I tell this to my students, there's that tension of sitting with the preciousness of the person, drawing out the Imago Dei, and you're still holding that tension of there's a lot of dysfunction and evil and struggle. And so we can hold both of those things, I think, in the same intention.
Yeah. And so just even taking what you're saying a step further, like the principle being when we see the Imago Dei in people, it gives us compassion for them. It helps us see the beauty in them and traces of God's handiwork in them. But then it also leads us to desire redemption for them, because we see that God-given potential in them. Man, what could God do with this person that's made in his image if Jesus enters the picture as this redemptive saving person in their life that begins to take that image and make it start to restore it into what he intended. That's amazing to think about, right?
Well, it is. And I think I want to make sure that just a little caveat, because I think when I've heard this, it's like, okay, I'm going to go charge that hill and I'm going to go do all these things. And we have to remember that it's our job to be the conduit, not the decision maker. Like, be present and point people towards that. But, I love the old, I don't know if it's the 18th century poem, The Hound of Heaven. That if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look it up. But it's an amazing piece of just talking about the fact that that's kind of the picture of the Holy Spirit. He's constantly chasing after us. Yeah. Constantly chasing after us. Yeah. And so us being that conduit of reminding people of whose they are, whether they realize it or not, gives them an opportunity for the Holy Spirit to capture their heart. Yeah. And then us being present, not our responsibility. It's kind of that fine line. It is our responsibility, but it's not, we can't own those things. But we can be a part of being faithful.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of what we're talking about here is person to person. Like, it's the way we interact with people. And I think that's part of, being made in the image of God. Even in the text, it's God making us in his image, and not just a single person that he says, all right, you're on your own. He creates male and female. So and the language is let us. So this is a triune God making man, not just one, but two. And so it's we part of being made in the image of a triune God who has community within himself is being made for community.
Yes.
It's the need for people and the need for relationship. So being made in the image of God, I mean, this is Jesus in his prayer in John saying, I and them and they and us, that they may be one. And so being made in the image of God, I talk about this in Psalm 8, but it requires a dependence. I mean, we are made for dependence on him and for community. We need each other.
Well, we think about it, it's a reflection of the triune nature.
Yeah.
Our relationship with God and our relationship with others. And, it's this completed trinity of just in the mind, body, spirit connection. And I think that's why I get frustrated that we silo our mind, body, and spirit, and the health of those things. But that's why I love the Christian Ockel song, Abide.
Yeah.
When
Great.
we sing it on Sunday.
Great song.
Because it's this idea that it's an intentionality, a reciprocal intentionality. Yeah. And let me ask you this. Do you feel like that if we are not in community, we are not fully abiding in the Imago Dei?
100%, Mark. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that question's a setup because you know the answer to that. It's like, yeah, 100%, man. If we are not in community, we can't fulfill the Imago Dei. I mean, that's like saying that, I mean, like you think of Jesus, right? Colossians says he is the image of the invisible God. He is the ultimate imager of God, right? And he didn't do it alone. He had people around him, disciples. He had this relationship with the Father. I mean, he wasn't alone and he wasn't in isolation. The only time he pulled away and isolated was just to spend time with the Father, and the rest of the time he's with people. And so, like, he's not on an island. He had friends. He had close friends, and so no. If Jesus, the ultimate imager of God, had that community and had that connection with God, then we cannot do it alone. And
so I think the thought that comes to mind then is encouraging those that are listening that have been burned, have been hurt. How did they restart that? Because I think, this plays into what I see in the world right now. I think we're not in a mental health crisis. We're in a loneliness epidemic, and so it's the lack of safe community. Yeah. And again, I'm not judging or blaming people that aren't in community because they've been hurt. Like it's
hurt's real.
Hurt's real. Yeah. So I think from the heart of faith, my thought is what can we encourage them with? How do they restart? Yeah. How do they get plugged in? Maybe they don't know how to restart, and that it's not safe because people at work aren't safe, or people at school aren't safe, or
sometimes they don't feel like people at church are safe.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. So how do they? What would be a pathway to community?
Yeah. I think the pathway to community is just start. I mean, just put yourself out there. I mean, that's the hardest part. Is when we felt hurt is saying I don't want to even risk it. Right. But sometimes you just gotta risk it.
Show up and get maybe involved in a life group, or come to a Sunday school class, or
in fact, like that's one of the things. Like it's one of the reasons I really love our life groups is because, man, it's Sunday mornings. You're already at church. Step into a life group. It's pretty non-threatening. Larger group. You can step in and kind of go, okay, all right, I'm dipping my toe in the water, and then. And we've seen smaller groups kind of form out of that. And so, there are ways to do it. Rick Wilcox, he can help anybody find a group, and you can tell them, hey, look.
Well, we're part of the reason we're here is because of him.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's great about Rick is, man, like if you're watching and you're like, man, I don't know how to step into community. Rick doesn't know me, and nobody know, and
he will know you.
Tell Rick that. Yep. And he knows our leaders, and he's going to go, I have just the group for you, and so.
So I think just start. And I know that coming into the new school year, there's going to be some cool things that are happening around here that they're going to help people get involved in groups. And that's my encouragement too, is to fully experience the Imago Dei. Yeah. You have to be in community. Yep. And I can't emphasize that enough. And it's a risk, but I take it.
It's always a risk because the image of God in us is broken.
Yes.
But when we are helping each other and encouraging each other, we're bettering the image of God in one another, man. That's, and so, you can't do it alone. And like you said, that's where, man, isolation is what gets us in trouble.
Right.
Because then we start turning to every other thing.
Well,
Yeah.
I say that loneliness leads to isolation. And I say that isolation leads to death mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
Yeah.
And so if you're feeling that way, like I've experienced this place to be safe enough to reach out and go, I don't know where or how, but I need to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, it's great. Dude, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I mean, I I love this topic. I know you love this topic.
Oh, yeah.
That's why you're here. But Imago Dei is just, man, it's mind blowing. We were joking earlier, we can make this like 3 or 4 sessions, and maybe we should sometime. But it's been fun talking with you, man. Always love having you here, and yeah, glad you guys are at Faith Bible, and glad to call you my friend.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.